Hey y'all, Short Dawn here with 7 Acres Homestead, looking over the top of the stock pot. Today we're going to be canning turkey broth, so I'm going to show you guys how we do that right now. Okay, so I have all of my materials together here. I have my 16-ounce pint canning jars that I'm using. I could use these big 32-ounce jars if I wanted to have bigger jars. I prefer the smaller jars because a lot of times when Tim and I are just cooking for us, we're making smaller portions of things. And I can always open 2 jars if I need twice that much broth. So I do like to use these for most of my broth activities. So I also have my canning lids out here. Yes, I do reuse my canning lids. And let me show you how I do that. I have this handy little tool right here. And this is used when the lid is on the jar. I'll show you guys how this works. Let's see if I can get this where y'all can see it. When the lid is on the jar, you just set this down here. You pop that right up and it takes that lid off. There is zero damage. There's no bending. There's no crimping. It does not damage the rubber seal on the outside. Now when I reuse these lids, one of the things I do is I go through and I inspect that rubber seal to make sure there's nothing getting wonky about it. It's not dried out. It's not cracked. It doesn't have any dirt on it. A good thing to do with these, if you're worried about it having any kind of residue, is to get white vinegar on a tea towel or a paper towel and just wipe that off. These were washed in my dishwasher, so they are, squeaky clean. No worries there. Then I have my canning funnel, which I'm going to be putting in the top of my jar. I have a sieve that I'm going to be using to get out any bits and pieces of anything when it goes in the jar. Now, if something tiny enough to fit through this mesh here gets through, I personally am not going to worry about that. If it is something you're worried about, then you may want to take a tea towel and just drape it over the top like this and pour it through your tea towel. That way it'll get the tiniest little bit of stuff out of there. I personally am not worried about that, so I'm not going to do that step today. It is helpful when you're using this big sieve like this to have something to set the handle on, so while you're pouring stuff in here, it doesn't accidentally go boop and out on the table. And so that's the only reason this jar is right here, is just to hold that handle up. The next thing I'm going to be doing is taking my handy little 4-cup measuring cup. Guys, I get these at Dollar Tree for $1.25, and I use them for a million things. If you watch my videos, you're going to see that I use them for cooking. I use them for canning. I use them to feed animals. I just use them for all kinds of things. And for $1.25, and they last you for a long, long time, they are amazing. Now, if you're real picky about your measurements, after you run it through the dishwasher a few times, these come off. So if you're wanting to keep it for measurement purposes, I would suggest taking a magic marker or a permanent marker and just go ahead and mark those measurement markings on there so that you don't completely lose those when you run it through the dishwasher. But if you're just using it as a good old scooper like I do most of the time, then they're great. If I have to measure something that's very precise, I use my measuring cups that are very precise for baking. So, okay, so I'm going to scoop some of this broth out of here. Now, this broth, I'll tell you guys about this first. This broth was leftover turkey carcass and skin and just all the pieces that are left from the turkey after Thanksgiving that you don't end up eating. I put it all in the pot, and I would suggest boiling it for at least 48 hours. And I say boil, I mean simmer. You guys want to simmer it for about 48 hours. And you can put it down pretty low and put a lid on it so it doesn't really like heat up your kitchen. Of course, you know, in November and December, that's not always a bad thing. But it will keep the liquid in there if you put a lid on it. The steam won't, you know, evaporate as much. And if you keep it in there for at least 48 hours on simmer, you're going to get all that good protein and vitamins and stuff out of those bones, and that's what we're looking for. So we're going to scoop this out, and we're just going to start slowly pouring this into our jar. Now, when I do a broth like this, I also add different things that I want to flavor it. This particular broth, I put all of my turkey pieces in there, and I put onion, and I put garlic, and I put salt and pepper. And so that gives us some really good flavor. Now I want to show this to you guys. I'm leaving about a 1-inch headspace here, and that gives it room to vent. I usually don't like to use less than 1 inch of headspace, and some recipes call for it, and if the recipe calls for it, I'd say go ahead and try that out first and see how it works for you. But I like 1-inch headspace because I don't like a lot of siphoning of stuff out of my jars, because I like for my water to stay clean in my canner, because it's a pain in the rear when you have to take it and dump it and scrub it all out and start over again. So this jar is ready to go, and I'm going to go ahead and start filling these other jars. Okay, so the next step that we're going to do here is we're going to take our white vinegar, got a folded up paper towel here. We're going to get some nice good blob of vinegar on there. You know, that's the technical term for it anyway. And we're going to wipe the rims of these jars off really, really good. Now, there's a couple reasons why we do this. The first one is, of course, we want to make sure that there is nothing greasy. There's no little bits of gunk on this, because we want a good seal on the edge of this jar. The second reason is when you start wiping this with this paper towel, if there's any kind of little cracks or divots or anything in there, you're going to feel that when you go across that. And you also can come back with your finger and feel it as well. And because I did that, I'm going to go ahead and rewipe that jar. And then we're going to put our lid right here, centered on top of that. We're going to take our ring, and we're just going to do it to where it's just a little bit tight. We're not going to crank down on it. We're not going to make it super tight. When they talk about fingertip tight, that's what they talk about. That does not mean you tighten it down as hard as you can with your fingers. It means just till you feel it really getting a good catch there. Because if you seal these up too tight, what happens is when it starts siphoning off the air inside of this jar, because it will do that in order to create that vacuum seal, then these lids are going to buckle, and that will cause it to not have a good seal. And if these buckle, you definitely don't want to keep them like that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that on all of these jars. up with 10 of these pint jars. And I want you guys to just see that beautiful color in that stock. Now this can be used to simmer something. If you have some meat that needs to simmer for 45 minutes or an hour or even longer to get nice and soft and edible, then this is an amazing way to flavor that meat. And the juice can also be used to make gravy when you're done. A lot of this brown color comes from the fact that that turkey was smoked in a smoker all night long, so it got a nice good caramel color on the skin. And I did use the skin as part of what I was using for my stock. So this just has an amazing color, amazing smell to it. So it's going to be really, really good whatever we use to cook with. Also, if you are making rice or pasta, anything that will absorb the flavor of what you're cooking, stock is also good for cooking that kind of stuff and giving it some really extra, kind of oomph of flavor. Now, again, you guys are going to notice I'm reusing some of my lids. Now, somebody on here may come at me for that, but I will tell you that this little tool, and I will put a link to this on my Amazon store in the description box. This little tool is amazing. I think it's about $15 to get one of these. It's hard metal. It's thick. It'll last forever. And if you ever come across one of these at a yard sale, get it. Because, again, it will last for, I think, a century probably is what I would guess to say. But if you can't find one at a yard sale, and then I've never seen one at a yard sale, then Amazon has them for about $15, $16. So I'll put a link in there to that. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this lovely jar lifter and we are going to put all of these cans in the canner so that we can go ahead and get it processing. Okay, so I have my canner. It's been here on the stove. I've got the water kind of simmering, not all the way up to a boil. You kind of want your water temperature to mimic the temperature of what is in your jars. So my stock was still warm from coming off the stove, but it wasn't at a boiling. So the best way to keep your jars from cracking or breaking during this part of putting it into the pot is to kind of mimic that temperature so there's not a huge temperature change in the glass of your jars. So we're going to go ahead and load these in now. Now I want you guys to take note that I do have the cushion plate in the bottom of this. And what that does is that keeps these jars from hopping up and down on the bottom of the canner as they're processing. And that in turn will again minimize chances of breakage of your jars while they're processing. Now I have the All-American 925 canner. I can double stack these jars if I need to. I'm not going to have to during this particular part of the canning process, because this bottom section holds right at 10 of these jars. Okay, so I've got all my jars in there nice and snug. And I've got my lid on here, and I want to show you something about this All-American canner. If you don't already have a good canner and you're looking for one, I have to recommend the All-American canner. It is amazing. The metal is, as you can see how thick that is, the metal is that thick all the way down to the bottom of the canner. It has 6 of these screws that screw this on. Everything is super heavy duty. Everything locks down tight. And not only do you have your place for your weight over here, but you also have your gauge here, which is something that helps you determine what your temperature and your weight of pressure is. Here in Texas, we do 10 pounds of pressure, which is at 240 degrees. And so that's kind of where we stick here because of our altitude. But these canners are amazing. This is the 925. This one runs about $450 on Amazon right now, and I will put a link to it in the description box so you guys can go in and take a look at it. Don't have the money to do it right now, put it on your little wish list or whatever for another day, because if you ever have to buy a canner or need to buy another canner, this will be the last one that you'll ever have to buy. A, and B, it's safe. I do not worry that I'm going to walk away from this thing for 30 minutes, come back, and it's going to have exploded through my ceiling. So, or worse yet, explode while somebody's in here in the kitchen and hurt someone. So anyway, that's my deal with the All-American canners. So I want to show you guys, if it'll focus good here. This is what's left over from my stock pot after I skimmed all of the liquid out of it to can it. And this is just leftover gunk from turkey, bones, skin, whatever meat's left. Leftover chunks of garlic and onion and all that kind of stuff. What I personally am going to do this is feed this to my chickens. The bones are great to put in your compost bin. You also can put those in the oven and bake them down for quite a while, and then put them through the blender and turn those into bone meal, which is also a really good fertilizer for your garden. And you also can put all these in the compost bin as well. So here on the farm, we try not to waste anything. Everything has a good purpose, and that's what we're going to do with this today, is we're going to give these leftovers to the chickens. Okay, next step, guys. Y'all hear that hissing noise? That is the steam being released from that release valve there. And we want that to be hissing like that for about 10 minutes before we put our weight on top, because what that's doing is that is building up steam inside of this thing. And I'm going to take my weight. See this very well or not? Let's see if I can get it to focus. Can't. Well, you got to take my word for it. I'm putting that on there, 10 pounds plus. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to let that run. And as you can see here, it is starting to build up steam. And we're going to get it up to that 10-pound mark. And when we get it to that 10-pound mark, this thing right here is going to start bubbling. We'll start hearing it, ting, 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 ting. So I'll come back in a minute and show you guys what that looks like. Okay, guys, so after I processed for 25 minutes, I took my canner off of the heat and I let it completely cool down to the point where it didn't have any pressure built up in it. Once that pressure gauge goes down, that's when you can take off your lid. You don't want to siphon the pressure out a whole bunch and you cause, some siphoning in your jars and buckling and things like that. You just want to let it sit there and cool down enough to take the lid off your canner without any issues. Then I put these on what I call my granny towels. And I put several layers of fabric underneath there to make sure that they don't mess up my wooden butcher block countertop. You always want to make sure you put fabric or towels or something underneath your jars when they're hot, because if they hit your cold counter, they could bust and spew all over the place. So these will sit on this counter without being moved for 24 hours at least. At that point, I will remove the rings and check all the seals and make sure the seals are good, and then I will put those away for next time I need them. So thank you guys for joining me today while I was canning this turkey broth. And if you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section. And I will put links to my Amazon store for the tool to open up your jar lids without tearing them up. And I'll also put a link in there to the All-American canner that I use. And then I will also put a link to a couple other size canners that are also All-American. That way, if you're on a budget and you want to get a little bit smaller canner, you can look at those sizes as well. So thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll see y'all later. Bye.